Okay, I'll start. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Yasam Tato Jayamudire Shinmatam Sukata Krishna Purni Shabra Kirtana Hridayanta Stoya Bhadrani Vidhanoti Shubhisatam Nashtiprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Neshtaki. I am reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 28, and verses text 19 and 20. Text 19. Namay Nashine Bhungte Nasnate Statrimatpara Mayrushte Susantrasta Bhartiste Yat Vagvibhayat. Synonym, excuse me, no, never, Mayi, when I, Anasite, had not eaten, Bhumte, she would eat, na, never, Snate, had not taken bath, Snati, she would take her bath, Matpara, always devoted to me, Mayi, when I, Ruste, was angry, Susantrasta, very much frightened, Bharsite, when I chastised, Yat walk, fully controlled of words, Bhayat, out of fear. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. King Puranjana then began to think of his past dealings with his wife. He recalled that his wife would not take her dinner until he had finished his, that she would not take her bath until he had finished his, and that she was always very much attached to him. So much so that if he would sometimes become angry and chastise her, she would simply remain silent and tolerate his behavior. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. A wife is always supposed to be submissive to her husband. Submission, mild behavior, and subservience, subservience are qualities in a wife which make a husband very thoughtful of her. For family life, it is very good for a husband to be attached to his wife, but it is not very good for spiritual advancement. Thus, Krishna consciousness must be established in every home. If a husband and wife are very much attached to one another in Krishna consciousness, they will both benefit because Krishna is the center of their existence. Otherwise, if the husband is too much attached to his wife, he becomes a woman in his next life. The woman, being overly attached to her husband, becomes a man in her next life. Of course, it is an advantage for a woman to become a man, but it is not at all advantageous for the man to become a woman. Excuse me. Text 20. Prabodhyati mavigyam vishate shokakarshita vartmayatad graha medhiyam veer sur api neshyati. Prabodhyati gives good counsel. Ma unto me, abhijanam foolish, viyushchite Viyushite, at the time of my being away, Soka, by aggrievement, Karshita, being aggrieved, and thus dried up, Vartama, path, Etat, this, Gra Medhyam, of household responsibilities, Veer Suha, the mother of great heroes, Api, although, Neshyati, will she be able to execute? Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. King Puranjana continued, thinking how, when he was in a state of bewilderment, his wife would give him good counsel and how she would become aggrieved when he was away from home. Although she was the mother of so many sons and heroes, the king still feared that she would not be able to maintain the responsibility of household affairs. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. At the time of death, King Puranjana was thinking of his wife, and this is called polluted consciousness. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 15:7, Mame Vanso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhutan Sanatana Mana Sasthana Indriyani Prakriti sthani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include mind. The living entity is, after all, part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit, Krishna. In other words, Krishna's constitutional position and the living entity's constitutional position are the same qualitatively. The only difference is that the living entity is eternally an atomic particle of the Supreme Spirit. Mame Vamsho Jivam Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. In this material world of conditioned life, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord, the individual soul, is struggling due to his contaminated mind and consciousness. As part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, a living entity is supposed to think of Krishna. But here we see that King Puranjana, the living entity, is thinking of a woman. Such mental absorption in some sense object being about the living entity's struggle for existence in this material world. Such mental absorption with some sense object brings about the living entity's struggle for existence in this world, material world. Since King Puranjana is thinking of his wife, his struggle for existence in the material world will not be ended by death. As revealed in the following verses, King Puranjana had to accept the body of a woman in his next life due to his being overly absorbed in thoughts of his wife. Thus, mental absorption in social, political, pseudo religious, national, and communal consciousness is cause for bondage. During one's lifetime, one has to change his activities in order to attain release from bondage. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 3:9. Yajnarthat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana. If we do not change our consciousness in this life, whatever we do in the name of social, political, religious, or communal and national welfare will be cause of bondage, of our bondage. This means we have to continue in material conditioned life. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 15:7, Manasasthani Indriyani Prakati Sthani Karshati. When the mind and senses are engaged in material activities, one has to continue his material existence and struggle to attain happiness. In each and every life, one is engaged in the struggle to become happy. Actually, no one in this material world is happy, but the struggle gives a false sense of happiness. A person must work very hard, and when he attains the results of his hard work, he thinks himself happy. In the material world, people do not know what real happiness is. Sukhyam atantikam yat tat buddhi grahayam atindriyam. Bhagavad Gita 6.21. Real happiness must be appreciated by one's transcendental senses. Unless one is purified, the transcendental senses are not manifest. Therefore, to purify the senses, one must take to the Krishna consciousness and engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Then there will be real happiness and liberation. As it is stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:8, Sariram yat avapnoti yach chapi ukramat sevara grihati vaitani samyati vayur gandhan ivasyat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. If the wind passes over a garden of roses, it will carry the aroma of roses. And if it passes over a filthy place, it will carry the stench of obnoxious things. Similarly, King Puranjana, the living entity, now passes the air of his life over his wife, a woman. Therefore, he has to accept the body of a woman in his next life. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रसाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्यनामिने Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshitarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I seek blessings from all the assembled Vaishnavas and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to purify myself by reading these Bhagavad texts. I'll narrate my summary and please forgive me for any shortcomings. Hare Krishna. So as we see in these texts, King Puranjana was overly attached to his wife and engrossed in thoughts about her. Reason being that she satisfies his senses to his satisfaction. King Puranjana was in really mode of passion. His wife was very obedient to him and tolerant of King Puranjana's misbehavior at times. In other words, she put him on pedestal and sort of worshipped him. As a result, King Puranjana was intensely attached to her. In general, this type of affectionate behavior is very pleasing to a husband. At the time of death, King Puranjana kept thinking of his wife and kept worrying that how his wife will not be able to carry out different responsibilities of the family when the king is gone. Although King Puranjana was overly absorbed in thoughts of his wife and thus took birth as a woman in his next life, however, he took birth in the family of a king due to his previous pious activities. This story shows that whatever thoughts one has at the time of death, one gets material body in next life accordingly. Krishna has said in Bhagavad Gita that if you think of me at the time of death, you will certainly come to me. Also, in context of rebirth, we can cite the example of King Bharat, who was a great emperor and highly dedicated in devotional service to Lord Krishna. However, he fell in love with a newly born deer and he personally started taking care and raising that small deer. As time went on, King Bharat got too much attached to the deer and kept thinking about deer's well-being, so much so that he slackened in devotional service. As a result, he was born as a deer in his next life. The lesson from these stories is that one should realize one's constitutional position, that one is servant of Lord Krishna, and one's duty is to render unalloyed devotional service to Lord Krishna and think of Krishna all the times instead of having attachment and thoughts of material things. Fruitive activities for sense gratification are the cause for material bondage or cycle of birth and death. As long as one is engaged in activities of sense gratification, one is certainly destined to transmigrate different types of bodies. People are mad after sense gratification and they do not realize that this present body, which is full of miseries, is the result of one's fruitive activities in the past. Although the mind may be engrossed in fruitive activities for sense gratification and under the influence of ignorance, one must develop love for devotional service to Lord Krishna. Only then one can have the opportunity to get out of the bondage of material existence. Activities in Krishna consciousness are not, however, activities on material platform. Action in Krishna consciousness is automatically helps one escape the result of fruitive action. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 10:10, Tesam satat yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogantam ye namam upayantite. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. In other words, those who are busy in serving Krishna through devotional service have opportunity to get out from the cycle of transmigration to different bodies. This is due to the fact that a person busy in serving Krishna through devotional service will highly likely think of Krishna at time of death. Uh, in Bhagavad Gita 1865 also, Krishna says, Man manabho mad bhakto mad yaji mam namaskarum mam e vasyasi satyam te pratijane priyo asve. Krishna says, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. I have part of the purport by Srila Prabhupada of this Bhagavad Gita verse. The most confidential part of knowledge is that one should become a pure devotee of Krishna and always think of him and act for him. Life should be so molded that one will always have the chance to think of Krishna. One should always act in such a way that all his daily activities are in connection with Krishna. And the Lord's promise is that anyone who is in such pure Krishna consciousness will certainly return to the abode of Krishna, where he will be engaged in the association of Krishna face to face. I will close here. Thank you very much, devotees. Hare Krishna.